Hi, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about pattern, texture, and scale, and the wonderful patterns and textures that we have in our printed fabrics today. I just love fabric, and part of the reason I love fabric is all the wonderful things that fabric just inherently has. I'm sure that if I were a painter, I'd be striving so much for realism that I'd lose all the wonderful nuances that fabric really brings in texture and scale and pattern. And we're going to talk about some of those things today. So let's first talk about blenders. Blenders are these that are semi-solid modeled type fabrics or tone on tones, okay? And you can see basically they're yellow. This is yellow on yellow, and this is a very small fine print tone on tone, and this is more of a modeled fabric. And these are all good blender type fabrics. I also like these in the skin tones to use for children because they don't have a lot of texture, and with children's skin we don't want to add a lot of texture that may end up looking like wrinkles. So a clear, clean skin is really good for this. And I don't care for solids because they read too flat. So I like to use blenders in place of places that you might use a solid. All right, the next group are batiks, and these are probably some of my favorites. The batiks are wonderful because you can get a batik that is more of a tone on tone or a solid modeled color, which is very useful, or you can get these wonderful fabrics that have many colors in them, and the way that the dyes just bleed together are really beautiful. And the fun thing about the batiks is that you can actually fussy cut pieces in interesting places so that you could get shading on one side, or a piece that is, in this case, maybe brown on one side and orange on the other. So if I were cutting out a leaf that I needed to have partially brown, I could fussy cut that perfectly. Okay, some batiks are like this in that they have a pattern on them. And here are two patterned batiks. The fun thing about batiks is they will never be the same. In most pattern printed fabrics, we have a repeat, and basically every time that we see the repeat, it's exactly the same. With these, there may be a repeat in the design, but there will never be exactly the same because of the dye. So it's very fun because you can look and look and look and find the perfect spot to put your piece. The next group are geometrics, and I like geometrics. The geometrics are basically your dots, your stripes, and plaids. And here's a dot, and here is sort of a dotted plaid, and then we have a wavy stripe, and then this fun wavy kind of stripe pattern here. Now I like these fabrics because I can use them in places where when I really want to say, don't take me too seriously, I'm trying to have fun here. And that's when I add things like maybe something with a little polka dot. And hopefully that's what it says. If I find that it's really glaring at me through everything else, then I might remove it and put something else. But I really like using those as sort of a surprise. The next group of fabrics we have are representational fabrics, okay? And these, basically what that means is they're elements of nature that are portrayed more or less realistically. So here, obviously, we can see that this is a rooster, and there's sunflowers back here. Okay, now some quilt artists will actually use these and cut out, for instance here, the rooster and the sunflowers and use them on a quilt and make them part of their landscape. Here are some grapes and leaves. This one happens to be of cats. All right, and this one is fish. Now the only thing that you have to be careful of in using these on your quilt, like I had just said, where you would cut them out, is you have to pay attention to scale. So for instance, if I'm doing a quilt where I have a lake and I've got a fish jumping out of the water that's maybe 3 feet from me, I might be able to use this. But when I have another fish jumping out of the water maybe 15 feet from me, I can't use the same fish because he's further away and he should be smaller. And so just be careful about using these in the right place so that the scale is right. Another example example here might be, we have these cats. So if I cut out a cat and set her next to a tree, let's say my tree though that I have from another piece of fabric is only about 2.5 inches or so. Obviously we know that a cat is not bigger than a tree. So again, we have to pay attention to scale. But you can use those effectively too. All right, the next group is stylized, and these fabrics are basically decoratively repeated, stylized, or simplified objects from nature. Here we have, this one is a peacock feather that is simplified and stylized and turned in different directions and colored fun, and so that makes it a stylized fabric. Here we can kind of see the seashells that have been stylized or simplified. We know that seashells don't quite look exactly like this, but it's been stylized and they're repeated in a pattern. This one is rocks and water basically flowing through the rocks, and again here we have, it's all very stylized. All right, so you can see all the wonderful patterns that we have that we can choose from to use in our quilts. And our lesson for today is, you have your PDF that you'll download is this is the drawing, and you can blow it up to about a 12 by 12. And the object here is to just use as many of these different things that we've talked about, the blenders, the batiks, the geometrics, the representational, and the stylized, and just try and use them together. And we're not going to worry necessarily about whether they go together or the pattern. We're just going to allow the texture to do its thing and see what happens. Here is mine. The only thing I did is I tried to stay in sort of a color, one or two colors, so that I had some kind of unity, but otherwise I just allowed the fabrics, to do what they do so well. The stripes going in a certain direction and just the patterns and everything, just to see what happens. All right, and the only thing you want to try to stay away from is, you don't want to do light, dark, because this is a stripe that goes through from top to bottom. And if you do a light, dark, you're going to end up with something that looks like maybe a jail cell. So just try and stay away from that. But just allow the fabrics to do their wonderful thing with texture and just see what happens. And then you can join me next time, because we're going to be talking about the personalities of color that advertisers use all the time to influence people, and we can use that too in our quilts.